What happens when the very system meant to uphold justice becomes a tool of oppression? A young boy's fate hangs in the balance, teetering on the edge of despair. But sometimes fate has a way of forcing the truth into the light, revealing cracks in a system built to protect only some. In a courtroom thick with tension, history itself seems to bear witness. The air is heavy, the dark wooden walls closing in, as 14-year-old Jamal Turner stands at the defense table, his future slipping from his grasp. Jamal stands rigid, his small hands curled into fists at his sides, his gaze sweeping across the jury. But he already knows they have made their decision. The crime, a robbery and assault he didn't commit. The prosecutor, a man with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, has spent the last hour twisting reality, shaping it into a weapon. He paints Jamal as a danger to society, a troubled child on a doomed path. There is no such past, no troubled history to speak of, but his words drip with certainty, and certainty is all that matters. The jury nods along, their faces hardening with each syllable. At Jamal's side, Maya Brooks, his defense attorney, stands tall, but her clenched fists betray her frustration. She has fought battles like this before, but today the odds feel insurmountable. The evidence against Jamal is weak, a collection of half-truths, misinterpretations, and outright lies. But in this courtroom, evidence means nothing. The judge, Randall Mathis, is well known for his bias, and the smirk he wears from the bench tells Maya everything she needs to know. This trial isn't about truth. The verdict was decided long before Jamal ever stepped into this courtroom. Jamal shifts uncomfortably, the stares of those watching weighing on him like chains. He is not a criminal. He is not a threat. He is a boy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the system doesn't care. The system never cared. Maya takes a breath, steadying herself before stepping forward. Your Honor, the case against my client is built on nothing but circumstantial evidence. The witness testimonies contradict each other. There is no forensic proof, and surveillance footage places him blocks away at the time of the crime. Judge Mathis exhales in exaggerated impatience, shaking his head. And yet, Miss Brooks, here we are. If your argument held any real weight, we wouldn't be wasting the court's time. A quiet chuckle escapes the prosecutor's lips as he shakes his head, dismissing Maya's words as if they are nothing more than a nuisance. The jury exchanges knowing glances. The case is already sealed in their minds. Jamal's heart pounds against his ribs. He can feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the ghosts of those who came before him, who stood in courtrooms just like this, accused, powerless. The judge's gavel cracks against the bench, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. We'll take a short recess before closing arguments, Matthews announces, his gaze landing on Jamal. Cold, dismissive. Don't go anywhere, son. We'll be wrapping this up soon. Jamal swallows hard, his throat dry. He turns to Maya, who places a firm, reassuring hand on his shoulder, her voice low, urgent. It's not over yet. But as he glances around the courtroom, the walls closing in, the weight of injustice settling over him like a suffocating fog, he isn't so sure. The minutes tick by, slow and cruel. The jury has been deliberating for what feels like hours. In reality, it has been only 30 minutes. That is all it takes to decide the fate of a child. In the front row, Jamal's mother, Tanya Turner, sits with her hands tightly clasped, silent prayers falling from her lips. Her eyes shimmer with unshed tears, but she refuses to let them fall. Not yet, not until she knows. Jamal sits beside Maya, his fingers gripping the edge of the defense table so tightly his knuckles turn white. Fear crashes through him in relentless waves, but there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The bailiff steps forward. All rise. Judge Mathis enters, his expression unreadable, though the faint curl of his lips does not go unnoticed. The jury files in, their faces devoid of hesitation, of doubt, of mercy. Mathis leans forward, voice calm, almost amused. Has the jury reached a verdict? The jury foreman, a middle-aged man with stiff posture, stands. We have, Your Honor. The room holds its breath. On the charge of robbery and aggravated assault, we find the defendant, Jamal Turner, guilty on all counts. A sharp gasp cuts through the air. Tanya lets out a strangled cry, her body trembling as she clutches the bench in front of her. Maya leaps to her feet, fire in her eyes. No! This is a miscarriage of justice! Jamal's world shatters. The words ring in his ears, but they do not feel real. Guilty. The judge nods, as if this was the inevitable conclusion all along. He leans forward, his voice steady, unfeeling. In my courtroom, we do not tolerate criminals. I sentence you to death by lethal injection. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence before chaos erupts. Tanya collapses, sobs racking her body as family members cry out in outrage. Voices rise in protest, a storm of disbelief and fury. Maya pounds the table. You can't do this. He's a child. But Mathis is unmoved. Jamal cannot breathe. His vision blurs, his chest tightens, and then darkness. The walls seem to close in around him, his world tilting under the crushing weight of his fate. Death. They were going to take his life for something he had never done. Jamal's hands trembled, his legs felt like they might give out beneath him, but he remained frozen in place, unable to resist the suffocating despair that held him captive. The judge's voice cut through the heavy air like a blade, his gavel striking down with finality. This courtroom is adjourned. He rose from his seat, his expression indifferent, his steps unhurried, as though the life he had just condemned meant nothing at all. Tears blurred Jamal's vision as the officers moved toward him, their heavy boots echoing ominously against the marble floor. His mother's anguished cries filled the courtroom, piercing through the stunned silence. But Jamal couldn't move, couldn't fight. The system had already made its decision. It had already deemed him unworthy of justice. Do you believe the system is rigged against people like Jamal? Why or why not? The courtroom teetered on the edge of chaos. Judge Randall Mattis lifted his gavel once more, preparing to bring this trial to its expected conclusion. A decision already made before Jamal had even stepped into this room. The weight of injustice pressed heavily on everyone present, everyone except the man presiding over the case. His smirk betrayed his eagerness to put an end to it, to finalize what had long been decided. Then, "Stop! We have new evidence!" The words rang out like a gunshot, freezing every movement in the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and all eyes turned toward the source of the voice. Xavier Miles, a young journalist, pushed through the packed rows, his breath labored, his hands clutching a thick folder in one hand and flash drive in the other. His forehead glistened with sweat, his chest rising and falling rapidly from his desperate sprint into the room. Maya Brooks, Jamal's defense attorney, turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp with both hope and suspicion. "Xavier Miles, investigative journalist," he replied between breaths. "I have proof, surveillance footage. It shows Jamal Turner was miles away when the crime occurred." The courtroom erupted into frantic whispers, the energy shifting like a storm about to break. The judge slammed his gavel down repeatedly, his smirk wiped clean from his face. "Order! Order in this court!" he barked, but his voice was lost amid the chaos. Tanya Turner, Jamal's mother, who had been sobbing moments ago, looked up, her tears halting in stunned disbelief. Hope flickered through her grief-stricken eyes. Jamal, still bound by shock, struggled to process what was happening. Was this real? Was this a cruel trick? Xavier shoved the folder into Maya's trembling hands. Security footage from a gas station across town, he said urgently. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Jamal was there at the exact moment of the robbery. He couldn't have done this. Maya flipped through to the documents, her breath catching as she scanned the images. The proof was irrefutable. Cold, hard facts that shattered the false narrative built against Jamal. She turned to the judge, still replacing the desperation in her voice. Your Honor, this changes everything. This court cannot proceed with sentencing when exculpatory evidence has just come to light. I formally motion for an immediate dismissal of charges and for the release of Jamal Turner. The judge's face darkened, his jaw clenching. His grip on the gavel tightened, his authority slipping away with each passing second. This is highly irregular, he muttered. What's irregular, Maya shot back, stepping forward with fire in her voice, is that my client was about to be sentenced to death for a crime he did not commit. A heavy silence followed her words. The weight of them settled on the shoulders of everyone in the room, pressing down with undeniable force. Xavier's voice rang out once more, steady and unwavering. Your Honor, the people deserve to know the truth. This case was rushed. The evidence was manipulated. The real criminal is still out there, and yet an innocent boy was nearly executed. The murmurs of the crowd grew into a roar, outrage rippling through the room. The prosecutor, once so confident, paled visibly, his mouth opening as if to object. But no words came. His carefully constructed case had just crumbled to dust in front of him. The jury exchanged nervous glances, some looking ashamed, others horrified at what they had nearly been complicit in. The judge's fingers curled tightly around his gavel, his expression unreadable. He had no choice. He knew it. They all did. With reluctant force, he slammed the gavel down one final time. This court is adjourned until further review of the evidence. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Tanya collapsed into grateful, heaving sobs, clutching Jamal's hands as though she would never let go. Maya exhaled shakily, blinking back her own tears. Xavier stood firm, knowing this battle was far from over. Jamal, still in shock, whispered, I thought it was over. Maya squeezed his shoulder, her voice soft yet fierce. Not today. Have you ever witnessed a last-minute twist of fate? Let's discuss. In the front row, a woman pressed a trembling hand against her lips, horror dawning in her wide, tear-filled eyes. Tanya Turner, Jamal's mother, clung desperately to the edge of the bench, her breath coming in unsteady, ragged gasps. She had spent weeks bracing for the inevitable, steeling herself for the cruel fate that the system had prepared for her son. And now, in a single shattering instant, the walls of injustice had come crashing down, exposing the truth that had been buried for far too long. Maya Brooks turned sharply toward the prosecutor, her voice laced with fury. You knew, she accused, her words cutting through the tense silence like a blade. You pushed for a conviction despite flimsy evidence. You ignored anything that didn't fit your case. The prosecutor swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to find words. He began, but no defense came. He had nothing. Nothing to justify what had been done. Then chaos erupted. The gallery exploded with outrage. Reporters scribbling furiously, cameras flashing like lightning, voices rising in furious protest. This is corruption, someone shouted. How many others have been wrongfully convicted? Another voice demanded. This judge needs to be investigated. The judge slammed his gavel, but the control he once wielded over the courtroom was slipping through his fingers like sand. His authority, once absolute, was crumbling under the weight of his own corruption. Maya stood firm, her presence commanding. This wasn't just an oversight. "This was intentional," she declared, her voice unwavering. "The prosecution wanted a conviction, at any cost. And you, Judge Mattis, allowed it to happen. You forced this trial forward despite knowing the evidence was weak. You refused to acknowledge the truth." The air in the room thickened with tension. The judge's face darkened, but he said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Everyone had seen the truth for themselves. Jamal sat motionless, his fingers digging into the arms of his chair. For weeks he had believed there was no escape, that the system would bury him regardless of his innocence. But now, for the first time, hope flickered in his chest. The truth was out. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time he had a chance. The uproar in the room only intensified. People shouted, reporters pushed forward, voices demanded accountability. The walls that had protected the powerful were beginning to crack. Judge Mattis, his grip tightening on the gavel, surveyed the angry faces before him. He was no longer in control. The weight of his own misdeeds bore down on him like an avalanche. Maya took a step forward, her voice ringing with unwavering conviction. "Your Honor, in light of the new evidence, I demand that all charges against Jamal Turner be immediately dismissed. This trial was built on lies and prejudice. Justice must be served." The prosecutor, pale and shaken, shifted in his seat but remained silent. His guilt was written all over his face. The walls were closing in. He had no argument to offer, no defense to hide behind. Judge Mattis stared down at the documents before him, his hands trembling slightly. He had spent years delivering verdicts with unquestioned authority, but now faced with the undeniable truth, he could do nothing but surrender to it. With a reluctant, heavy sigh, he leaned into the microphone. "In light of the new evidence," he said, his voice strained, "the court overturns the verdict. Jamal Turner is hereby exonerated of all charges." For a moment, silence. Then the courtroom erupted. Cheers, applause, shouts of relief and triumph. Tanya Turner collapsed into sobs, clutching her son as though she would never let go. Jamal, still stunned, struggled to process what had just happened. He was free. The nightmare was over. Or was it? Maya, though relieved, knew this was only the beginning. She turned to the judge and prosecutor, her gaze like fire. "This isn't just about Jamal," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "How many others have been sentenced unfairly? How many innocent people have been buried by this system? This ends today." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and then it grew. A tidal wave of voices rose in unison, demanding justice, not just for Jamal, but for all who had suffered under the weight of a broken system. Judge Mattis swallowed hard, his once unshakable authority crumbling beneath the force of public scrutiny. The prosecutor, now a man disgraced, avoided the accusing stares that burned into him. Outside, the movement had already begun. Protesters gathered, their voices merging into one deafening demand: justice. Jamal stepped outside, the sun warm on his skin, real and tangible in a way he had almost forgotten. He inhaled deeply, the weight that had crushed him for so long finally beginning to lift. But the scars remained. He had lost time. He had lost trust. He had lost innocence. And yet, as he looked at his mother, at Maya, at the people who had fought for him, who had stood by his side when the world turned its back, he knew one thing with certainty. He wasn't alone. Days after the trial, the shock waves of Jamal Turner's wrongful conviction continued to ripple across the nation. The case had ignited a fury that could no longer be ignored. Headlines screamed for accountability. Social media erupted with demands for justice. The public refused to let this injustice be buried under bureaucratic silence. Judge Randall Mattis, once untouchable, now found himself at the center of a growing investigation. Legal experts combed through his past rulings, uncovering a chilling pattern of racial bias in his sentencing. As pressure mounted, his once commanding presence shrank into disgrace. The very gavel he had wielded to pass judgment now symbolized his own downfall. The prosecutor, no longer able to escape the weight of his own actions, resigned in disgrace. His career, built on winning cases rather than seeking truth, lay in ruins, destroyed by the very lies he had once used to condemn the innocent. Meanwhile, Jamal was free, but freedom was not the same as justice. For weeks he had sat in a cell, fearing for his life, suffocating under the weight of a system designed to crush him. He had walked into the courthouse as a victim. Now he walked out a survivor. Yet he was not the same boy who had been arrested. The innocence he had once carried had been stripped away, replaced by something else, something sharper, something unbreakable. His mother, Tanya, never let go of his hand. She had nearly lost her son to a lie, and now she vowed to fight so no other mother would endure the same pain. Maya Brooks, the relentless attorney who had fought for him, stood before a sea of reporters. Her voice, unwavering and fierce, rang with a single, undeniable truth. This isn't just about Jamal Turner. This is about every innocent person who has been denied justice. This is about dismantling a system that allows this to happen. This is just the beginning. And the people listened. Protests erupted across the country, streets filled with voices demanding reform. Activists, lawyers, and ordinary citizens called for change, an end to biased jury selections, accountability for corrupt prosecutors, and a justice system that served truth, not personal ambition. This was no longer just one boy's fight for freedom. This was a revolution. Jamal, still grappling with the weight of his ordeal, stood before a group of young boys in his neighborhood. His voice, steady yet filled with emotion, carried across the quiet space. "I almost lost my life to a lie," he told them. "Now I'll spend the rest of it making sure this never happens again." The world had tried to break him, but Jamal Turner had emerged stronger. He was not just a survivor, he was a fighter, and his battle had only just begun.